Oh.
Good morning. Welcome to the Higher View. I'm Dr. Laura Shackelford, and I have an amazing person here with me today to really kick it off. I had a little sneak preview a couple weeks ago, but Diana Wentworth is my first official real guest, and just want to tell you what I want the Higher View to be about are some amazing people that have an incredible story, spiritual and just really wonderful story, and yet they're still doing amazing work in the world. They are not letting COVID stop them. So welcome, Diana. This is our second conversation. We have them privately off and just kidded off just right up. So let me tell you a little bit about Diana Wentworth. She's a New York Times best-selling author, hold on, this I don't know what camera. And she's written a lot of books, but that one, we'll get into Diana's background because she is an amazing cook. And but this is the one that I read that I was crying. Send me someone. Mm-hmm. And I read the whole thing. I mean, in one day, I just sat and I couldn't put it down because it was so touching.
Thank you.
So Diana, I want to talk a little bit about I don't even know where to begin, except you had an interesting lifetime. I want you to know that Diana actually dated Elvis Presley a few times. I thought I'm like, what?
I know, me too.
You got to get this book. I was just blown away. And then when we were talking, one of the things too that I had no idea is Diana's dad helped Ernest Holmes build the Founders Church. He used to come to your house for breakfast sometimes.
He did. Right. Isn't that amazing to have that incredible connection? You know, it just is amazing to me.
Well, so what were you raised though? Were you raised in?
I went to a Christian Science Sunday school. My dad was manic depressive. We didn't know those words in those days, and he was, right. His moods would shift all over the place, and but he was very attracted to the Science of Mind church, and he started going there. He got to know Dr. Holmes, and he ended up donating, I think, either all or some of the chairs for that church. It was an early thing. And then I had a brother, I do still have a brother, thank you, who was very curious about religions and what was the true religion. And he made his high school have 4 years of Latin so that he could translate St. Thomas Aquinas in the original. I mean, this is not a normal brother, No. Most of them play basketball and football and all that stuff, but my brother was a scholar and ended up founding the Department of Religion at the University of Washington. So because of that background, my brother used to take me, instead of to the ice cream store, he would take me to Yogananda's temple and all and the Jewish temples. I mean, and just have this experience of all this wonderful. I always saw that it was all one path, so that had a huge effect on me.
Well, and also what I found interesting in your book, Diana, was how in your times of darkness, or that was what really got me, is how you would just like make a demand on the universe for answers. Right? It worked.
Right. I call it a spiritual alchemy, that when one is at a point where you're so fed up, you've been trying to do just the right things for such a long time, and you suddenly get, now, this is enough of this. I promise that I will do whatever it takes to live this, whatever it is that path you put me on, but I need it now. And the first time it happened, we were negotiating to do a television show, my late husband and I, with two different stations, and both shows came through on the same day, right after I did that. So I remind myself that it pays to have an intensity and a very strong vibration sometimes when we're asking for things.
And that's interesting, because I have a dear friend of mine who, they were going through some really difficult time, and she's doing her prayers and, and expecting it to happen, and it wasn't happening. And she did the same thing you did. She no, enough is enough. Waited long enough. What I'm to do? And things has just popped open for her after that point. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that demand on the universe, knowing that there is something listening and you are receptive, and the universe going, okay, I guess she needs it, right?
Right. We're aligning with that pure spiritual vibration, the essence, the divine, and it responds. I think it's our state that it responds to. So being in charge of our state is, I think, our most important job right now.
Right. So you had an interesting life in that your father, like you said, he had his psychological issues. He was a great provider, but wasn't the most affectionate. He provided for you well financially, but not so much emotionally and support.
Not at all, really. It was I think we all have a baggage or something, pain that we carry. It's not visible all the time. But he was very demeaning toward me. And, I was looked upon I was a girl. So my only way of succeeding would be to be extremely attractive so that somebody would take care of me. I mean, that was really his viewpoint. And I kind of, but I knew, I had an inner knowing all my life that I wanted, and maybe because of my father, I really wanted a deep, intimate, loving, romantic relationship more than anything. That was my highest priority. And I've been very blessed that way, and having two husbands.
Right. Well,
amazing.
So what was interesting, what I found interesting too in your book was how you listened to your intuition. Mm-hmm. You were engaged. You were already engaged to be married, and you just knew this was not the one. This was not the man for you.
Right. I did know that. He was an amazingly powerful, very wealthy man. And one day I just thought, he doesn't have that capacity for intimacy, that he doesn't even know who I am. I was decorative, and I just knew that wasn't what I was supposed to be doing. And I picked up the phone and told him that. And he kind of agreed. He saw the truth of that. And the next day I went on a trip with my parents to Asia, and with a kind of a feeling of having done just the right thing, and knowing that I was in a wonderful, receptive place. And I woke up one morning in Hong Kong. It was our last stop, and it was very early in the morning, and I got all dressed up and went down and stood in the lobby, and I thought, what am I doing here? What is this about? The elevator door opened, and two men walked out, one who was just so strikingly wonderful, and his friend was paged to the telephone, and Paul was standing practically next to me, and we started talking, and we were engaged 3 days later. So, and we were married for 25 amazing years before he was diagnosed with cancer.
And those 25 years, you both created a lot. Mm-hmm. It wasn't like just, this story, fairy tale, in the sense that he had money, everything was set and so forth, because you had that growing up. You had everything. And your dad had always told you that you would always be taken care of. He told you wouldn't amount. What was the thing he used to say to you that you would
never have to work, which is actually a curse, when you think about it. We're all here to express our divine expression in the world. And but the truth was, and it was kind of beautiful too, because there was a lawsuit that my father had, and then he passed away, and our trust funds were taken away, my brothers and my trust funds. So Paul and I had to figure out we had to reinvent ourselves pretty much on the spot. And that was the best thing that ever happened to us, really. It didn't feel like it at the time, but it's been incredible.
So your passion then has always been cooking too. That was part of isn't that kind of, tell them how that started before you wrote the book and you got your TV show, because you just would like to entertain and have people over and cook, right?
I think many of us are influenced by our grandparents in certain ways, more so than our own parents. And my grandmother ran a boarding house and she loved to cook. And my mother also enjoyed cooking, but I loved it. I didn't realize until later, and I'll just give you this overview. I love to cook and have people over and cook for them. It felt good to me. I liked the vibe of people in meeting each other and enjoying each other. And food was kind of a catalyst for that. I didn't really see that it wasn't about the food for a very long time. Paul and I wrote 6 cookbooks. The first one, The Pleasure of Your Company, won Cookbook of the Year. It took me 5 years to write because I didn't know how to write a cookbook in those days. But we were really on a wave of interest in French cooking, especially because Julia Child went on the air, and we were all willing to cook for days and make this splendid meal. But I loved creating menus, and when I had a baby, my world changed totally. I wasn't prepared for how totally it would change, and found myself at home. But some friends started wanting me to teach the cooking because I'd gone to Paris and I had studied some at the Cordon Bleu. That was really my interest in schooling. And so I started teaching cooking classes in our home. And those were all menus for entertaining. And the pleasure of the company meant that you could get everything done in advance and then just enjoy the people. So we rode that wave for a long time until 1985, when women went into the workforce and they could care less about cooking and having people over. They'd rather order from the super chefs, and all of that. And we had to change horses in midstream completely. We'd had a TV show. We were with Robinson's department stores. We traveled all over the world cooking on cruise ships. But all of a sudden we had no business at all. And that was really weird. But fortunately, we joined a very radical motivational group where you had to make a goal that you would achieve in 3 weeks. And it had to be something way beyond anything you'd ever done before. And in this group, we met people like Jack Canfield and Barbara DeAngelis, who had never written books yet.
Oh, really?
No, this was in the early days. This is 1983. So, but through that, we were invited to go to the Soviet Union with a group of people who were really known in the human potential world. So this was Mike Farrell from MASH and Dennis Weaver and the Real Patch Adams and Swami Satchidananda. And they were going into the Soviet Union because of the Cold War, and there's no conversation between our country and Russia. And so our job was to go in as citizen diplomats and carry on conversations with the Soviet people and get to know them and have to start dialogues. And it was very confronting and amazingly so. But the big thing that came out of that was we noticed in this group of 80 people that they began sharing resources. These were all people who were loners, who just wanted the world to be a better place. And they started sharing contacts and so on. And Paul and I saw some magic there. And so when we came back, we started Power Breakfast. We're just starting in New York. So it was the beginning of networking. And we started a networking breakfast called the Inside Edge. And it began and it grew very, very fast. In those days, if you wanted to hear somebody like Ram Dass or Gene Houston or anybody like that, you had to go somewhere. You had to show up somewhere. We didn't have the internet yet. So we started this group in Los Angeles that met at 6:30 in the morning, which is crazy. But, what else is anybody doing at that hour? And because of the people that connected with us and were on our advisory board, we had Wayne Dyer and people like that, just because of connections that we made. Everybody said yes to coming to Los Angeles and speaking. And then through Peggy Bassett at the Church of Religious Science, we started another one in Orange County and then did another one in San Diego. So we were 3 mornings a week in different cities hosting the greatest speakers that we could find, and they would, Alan Cohen, all these people would come, and it's still going. We have it still every week on Zoom, InsideEdge.org. Yesterday we had Penny Pierce, who is the author of Transparency and Frequency, and we have Alan Cohen coming up, and
you're still really involved in that then?
Yeah, I book all the speakers and I host the Zoom shows too. Yeah, so that's really fun for me. I've gotten so that I really love connecting with people this way that we're doing right now.
That is amazing. And what I'd love for you to just share the story about. So right after you started the Inside Edge is when your first husband was diagnosed with cancer, right?
Yeah, it was about 4 years. 4 years into it.
You just opened up the San Diego one though, right?
We opened them all up in the first 6 months, and so we got to run those together for 4 years.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And so that was so tell them, I mean, the story. What I love about you and your story is how you persevere. You have been somebody that could hit a wall, but you always knew that there was an answer. There was more. There was still more for you. And so I just, the story about when your first husband was dying and he was aware that he was going to die and he was so worried about you. I mean, your love story was, I highly, ladies, I know you will love this book.
Oh, thank you.
I know you love this book, and it's a good love story. And what's in your writing was beautiful, and your journaling.
It took me 10 years to write that book, and I had been keeping journals for years, but wow, it's hard to put together something that reads like a movie. I always wanted it to be a film. Yeah.
It definitely did. But anyway, so just the story about that during that part when he knew he was going to die, you knew it was coming to an end and how he was worried about you.
Yeah. It was one afternoon. It was probably about 10 days before he passed, and I thought he'd fallen asleep. I was sitting next to him on the couch, and so I got up to go get some water for him, and he said, "I don't want you to be alone." And I said, "Send me someone." I mean, that just blurted out of my mouth. It just came from my soul. And he said, I will. And I know that he always had felt that when he went to the next place, that he would be free, to be anywhere, to be able to maybe manipulate the weather or whatever. And there was something about that just really resonated with me. And then I felt him very present after he passed, and I would journal with him. And he would tell me to do certain things, and I would do them. I mean, it was really, it's an interesting story. It really is.
Kind of woo, but
I know, it sounds so strange, but there's, I didn't hear his voice or anything, but I just sensed the words, or I sensed. It's almost an auditory thing. But about 6 weeks after Paul, no, it was a bit further. It was about 3 months after Paul passed. I was still running the Inside Edge, of course, and the Orange County chapter. And there was a widower named Ted Wentworth who had been looking for his new wife for 2 years. And he told everyone in the world that he wanted Mrs. Right. He was looking for just, and so to fix him up with everybody, everybody was introducing him. None of them were right. He had a computer program, and this is early days, created to keep track of all their names and their dogs' names and where they'd been to school, because there were so many. I was number 131 in his list of women that he went out with over the 2 years. But the minute he walked in the door of the Inside Edge, he said to the man who brought him there, he said, "She's here. My new wife is in this room."
Wow.
And I was hosting that morning, and it had only been a few months since Paul had passed, and somebody said, "Diana, how are you really doing?" And I said, I've never really experienced solitude before, and it's quite interesting, really. I think, any man who looks at me with the idea of a live-in relationship might become the victim of an axe murder. That is not something I would normally say either. I mean, if you knew me, that just isn't, it sounds so violent coming out of my mouth. But Ted was in the audience, and his ears just totally perked up at that. He knew the minute he saw me that I was the one. And he walked up to me, and the first thing he ever said to me was, "Will you live with me?" And I raised my hand like I had an axe. And we were married 6 months later. So,
and how many years have you been married now?
31 in December.
Wow, congratulations. Paul did send you someone.
There were a lot of magical occurrences, but I'll let people read the book, because there were all these signs that came up, as you remember, that said, okay, this is the person that Paul sent. Yeah.
Really. And Ted, your current husband, he's very spiritual too. He's written the Enlightened. I don't know where the camera's. The Enlightenment Code. Right. You can see I've been putting. I haven't read it yet, but Build a Better Spouse Trap.
Yeah, right.
His attorney building his case. He's an attorney. And I told, because I'm a court reporter, I sent Diana a text after I read it. I said, I don't think I've ever met an attorney that I thought was spiritual.
I know. It was wonderful, though. He started meditating with Maharishi in 1970, and I started in 71. And that was so great when we started dating, that we had that in common. And he was so open to everything spiritual. He had gone to India and interviewed masters. He sent a man around the world for 4 years.
I would have liked to have been Dale. I said, it was Dale. And I thought, I'll go. I said, what a great job that would be.
It was. But, he was, and Ted is so different than Paul. Paul was so artistic and quiet, and silent type. Not as spiritual as I was, but trusted my spirituality and my inner knowing. But Ted is like this kind of a Robin Williams character with a great sense of humor, isn't it great at this time of life to laugh at ourselves,
Absolutely. Absolutely. Isn't that the truth? It's like, it definitely is. It's like, that's what life is for, right? And to look back and to look back at our lives. And I think this is a good time, like with COVID, to really look back and look at that was the beauty of your book was, yes, there were challenges, like with your first husband, but those challenges made you a team, whereas sometimes in relationships, right? Mm-hmm. Challenges can split them up, but you two really worked through your financial challenges, your different challenges that came up. And don't you think, Diana, that's why we're here? I mean, we are here to experience life.
Yes.
And those
we're just sitting around on a cruise ship,
right.
It's our challenges that mature our soul, or that allow us to come much more in alignment with our divine state, that we can live in more and more and begin to be at the top of the triangle. and look down at the duality, and find ourselves, even in these times that are so insane, to find ourselves trusting in the divine, and that there is this divine plan, and not getting so hooked by it, being open to the magic of what can be born through this.
Right. And this is an opportunity for us to recreate something new again, something different, and have the time to go within and really examine that. And that's one of the things. Your name was given to me by Judith Jordan. I hope Judith's watching. I'm grateful. Because I said, I'm starting this show and I want some really incredible women. And she said, oh, Diana's doing this workshop this weekend. You should, see if you're interested in her. Mm-hmm. So Diana works with the Palm Springs Writers Guild. She was doing a workshop. Yeah, and one of the things that I thought was, and made me start thinking about it, you were telling that group, because how you journal and so forth, that even just to write a kind of a book or your story of your life to lead to your children, things that they don't know about you. And I thought, wow, that, as a child, what were the things that I loved hearing the stories of my mom, that she and my aunt would get together and they would talk about their childhood and their stories. And, would you talk a little bit about that, Diana, about, the journaling and writing your story and why that's important?
Well, I think it's for all of us, especially elders, and the world is changing so fast. We all have like our chicken soup for the soul stories. We don't have to go back and dig through all the pain and drone on about that, but we can choose, just simple magical stories. My husband wrote one for the chicken soup for the soul cookbook about he went to his mother and he said, well, where did I get my sense of humor? And she said, well, it must come from grandfather Alzheimer. And she told this story about how back in the early 1900s that people would buy horseradish from a cart in Brooklyn, and that they would have these Sunday dinners. And the grandfather always wanted the hot horseradish, the fresh horseradish, and they didn't always get it. So sometimes it would be kind of dried up in the bottom, and he'd say, look, I can eat a whole spoonful of this. So what they did was they surprised him by making it look old, but it was brand fresh, and he took a whole spoonful and his head exploded, and just the humor of that. You get the sense of the family around the Sunday table. You get the sense of what it was like in those days and how people were, and some family history. So I encourage people to just write a few legacy stories. Mm-hmm. There was one where my mother took me aside one Thanksgiving, and she said, I have to talk to you. Come with me. And she took me in the pantry and she said, you have to promise me something. And I said, what? And she said, you must promise me that you will never, ever feel guilty about me. I've spent my whole life feeling guilty about my own mother. And I want you to promise me right now you will never do that. And so whenever I have a feeling of guilt about my mother, of not being there for her as much as I could have and all of that, I think, okay, I did promise her, so I have to keep that promise. And, I can help people kind of dig for the gold,
nuggets like that. And I think that was a beautiful thing your mom said. I'd say that to my kids. I'd say, you know what, don't ever feel guilty. I never want to make them feel like, oh, you need to call me or you need to be here for this. And it's like Mother's Day. You don't have to, if you need to be with your wife's mother, do it. Mm-hmm. Anytime I'm with you is Mother's Day, right? Yeah.
How sweet. How fortunate.
But that's how, because I had a lot of guilt put on me about stuff and I hated it. And and so those are the things though, at those moments in your life that you can say, they're good lessons to say, I'm going to do it different.
Right.
That's not how I would have wanted to be. And so that's what I try to do. Of course, I always say, doesn't mean how many years of therapy are they going to need because of what I did. I don't know. don't know.
I love
So
to get people telling stories. Once they realize that they have these kind of magical memories of what life was like or something that affected them deeply, then to get it down on paper or talk it into a video, right on your computer. So
right.
it goes beyond you, and it goes into your family, and it has an effect that can be very powerful for future generations. Yeah.
Absolutely. So Diana, so you're still busy then with right now currently with the Inner Edge.
The
And so,
inside edge, yeah.
so you do, and you live here in the desert, right? You live
I
here.
do. I live in Palm Springs. We moved here about 6 years ago, and I love it.
Oh,
I
good.
love it here. This is just the right place for us. That was the right thing to do.
Oh, yeah. It's a nice community. It is a very wonderful little community.
Friendly, yeah, friendly, and with the world the way it is right now, I feel especially grateful for it. Don't you?
Oh, absolutely. I'll have to say I'm a little jaded because I've been here since '76
Oh my God.
here, and it's getting a little too crowded.
You've seen a lot of change.
I remember when I used to, because I was a court reporter, I could be at the courthouse in Indio, and they would need me to go to Palm Springs, and I could be there in 20 minutes because we had no stoplights. Just go down 11 and turn over, and I was there. So I've seen a lot of changes, but I also remember in those days, we didn't have the mall. Even we had no mall, and I'd have to go to San Diego or Orange County to go shopping for work clothes because all they would sell here are tennis and golf. So you take the good with the bad, and so, but yeah, so I love that. So isn't this amazing with the COVID, how we have access now through Zoom and all these different technologies to still connect and to still contribute to the world.
Yeah. And it's been so purifying, really. I think the fact that we are in lockdown, and my husband and I are going to stay this way for as long as it takes, for sure. But it's been so purifying in that I think all of the superfluous stuff, the frivolous stuff, I really don't want to go back to my life as it was. A lot of it was meaningless. It really was. And I think that we can be part of our own presence. We have so much time. We have time to meditate and pray and connect, to journal, to read uplifting books and find uplifting speakers at the Inside Edge or elsewhere. There's so much available online with all these great teachers. I sometimes say everything falls away, ideally. And I feel that so much has fallen away. And then I can move much more into the transparency that I attain to be in, that true soul, that soul body that it doesn't have all of the, the old sanskara, as they call it in the Vedic tradition, the wounds, the regrets, the resistance, because that's where all the pain is in those places, and we have time to clear that clutter. And just be purified by this situation that we're in.
Yes, I think so. I constantly feel like the universe put us on a pause.
Yeah.
Because I don't believe there are accidents in the universe. I believe there's a divine reason for everything, and we may not understand it at that moment. And so, this has slowed us down, and yes, so what do we realize? We realize we really do miss certain people in our lives, that we're maybe not able to be with as often, but to have that time to go within and to really just, I think it was in Ted's book where he talked about how our bodies are just the container.
Yes.
The divine.
The
Oh, I love that.
Uh-huh.
I love that visual that he said that our bodies are just the containers and that we are really the divine. It's like the flowers might think that they're the vase, but they're the flowers, that they fill the vase. And so I think that people, instead of resisting or fighting or being upset, yes,
Mhm.
there may be some things that you have to give up, but what are you gaining right now?
Yeah.
What are you
It
gaining now?
requires surrender, doesn't it? I think surrender and faith, trust.
Yes.
Surrender and trust are the liminal. That's the liminal space of the threshold of allowing us to align with the divine design.
Yeah.
And we can't do that if we're all frenzied or cluttered, or if we tune into the news too often. We need to know what's going on, but we can take it in a nutshell and not turn it on until late in the afternoon and not have
Right.
it.
But then you got to go to bed, and then that's in your hands. So I don't know.
Right. Then I have to watch a Hallmark movie or something.
There you go. Do something else to do that. So, are you writing anymore? Are you working on anything right now, or?
Well, I have been working on a book for quite a while called Expect Magic. I started a group out here and one in Newport Beach of women. This is before COVID, where we would just get together once a month with no other design except to discover some new soul sisters,
Right.
and see what magic emerged from that. And so that led to meeting Judith Jordan, who led me to you.
Oh.
So I like to live in that space of expecting magic and to invite that in. When I first wake up in the morning, quite often we wake up with kind of a dread, or like, what is it I have to get done today, or what tedious thing needs doing. Whereas I like to focus on first with gratitude, and then maybe speaking out loud, even that I think somebody told me, I guess it was a medical medium, says that if you're asking the angels for support, you need to speak it. And you need to ask that they don't act on their own. So I haven't had a lot of experience, but I've certainly had a lot of results from asking for beauty and growth and trust and the ability to surrender, and in the morning, and just saying that I expect magic to happen, and it does. It happens constantly, daily, really. That there are these blessings that are unpredicted and that just kind of show up, or opportunities out of nowhere that keep my career going. And I've just learned so much to be grateful for that and to trust it.
So, do you still do your monthly meetings now with Zoom, or have you stopped that?
It's a strange thing about people who are older. They just don't get into doing the technology. We do it for Inside Edge, but it would take an in-person meeting, and I don't know when that'll happen again. But
right. Oh, yeah.
We're meeting some great women out here, though. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, there are some.
Oliphant, she's been.
Oh, I know. I have to get Joyce on when she comes.
For sure.
Yeah, when she comes back, and yeah, she's amazing. So you're writing this book about magic, and I love that, because I think that if we expect to see good, we're otherwise, if you're thinking negative, you're like, you've got the blinders on. You don't see all the things. Just even sometimes. Like, I just looking out and seeing our beautiful mountains. Like, how blessed are we?
Yes. Isn't that the truth?
It is so true. I remember talking to somebody about, they were kind of moaning about the COVID. And I said, you know what? We're so blessed to be where we are. We're not worried about bombs dropping on us or people shooting, gun, wars around us.
Right.
We can open our faucet and have water. There's so many things that we just take for granted. And just like what you were saying about the stories of our childhood, I mean, those are sweet memories too. I remember one of my favorite was the rotary dial phone when we first got our phone, and it was a party line, and I'd listen to the people.
Oh, so funny.
And it's like, and it's amazing how life evolves, isn't it?
It is. It is. And, something else I've been writing, and I started early on in March, is a coronavirus diary of all of the feelings of what is this? Well, how is it changing? You know how it was in the beginning. We were all kind of making up a whole new way of being. And I thought, this is going to be interesting someday to look back on. And
that is a brilliant idea.
I was encouraging kids to do the same thing, that this is a piece of history that will not, hopefully, ever come again, but we are all experiencing it, and we'll forget what it was like, So it's important to kind of document these transformations that we're going through.
Wow, I never even thought, but that is a great idea, because yes, this is something that we have never faced in our lifetime, and maybe to help future generations, if they have their own COVID moment or whatever it is how did we get through it?
Right.
And what came out of it? What self-awareness is going on in our lives right now? What it's the for some reason this weekend I haven't really been out much, but my sons and my grandchildren, we went up to the Sequoias. Canyon, mask and all, but just to be in nature.
Yes.
And I don't see stars anymore. And to see the Milky Way, those pleasures of life that are just, I just got God bumps just thinking about, really look at what's going on and the people in your life, that even if you can't see them, and this is the only way you can see them sometimes, we're so, that heart, that energy, and the world needs this love and this energy right now, doesn't it?
It does. Yes. I've always, people, I'm backtracking here, but people have always asked me how I ended up with two incredible men. And it's been my focus. And something that I discovered that we finally put words to was, it's not the gift is not in being loved. The gift is in loving. The gift is in that feeling of beneficence, of wanting to nurture and support and care for the people that we love in our lives. That's, that way the energy is coming out of us. It's flowing, and it's not a suck, it's not need. It's not, I don't know what I'll do if I don't have him because I need him. That is the worst energy. That is a very low energy. But the energy of wanting to be beneficent and to bless and to make a meal for, to introduce people to each other, to spark joy. I do coaching, life coaching, and joy, make joy your compass is something that I often say, because that's the highest vibration. And when we're in joy, we're open and we're benevolent. So.
And I love that, Diana, because don't you think a lot of times people get in relationships, well, if I do this for him or her, she should be doing this for me.
Right. But it has to have a balance, right?
Versus, no, I just want to do this because I love you. And that's the joy I get, right? Is from the loving. I mean, that's how I feel with kids. I don't expect anything. I just want to be able to love on you and do things for you. And
then it flows back, in the most beautiful way. That's it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And, and when I was reading about your childhood and stuff, I was thinking too, because like my dad was not affectionate at all, but it goes back to his childhood.
Absolutely. But
you have to understand that. You have to understand. And I always say being a parent is your opportunity to parent the way you would like to have been parented.
right.
You know.
I really healed my relationship with my dad through journaling that I learned in some very, very deep journal classes I took at UCLA. And they talk about one's ability to have a dialogue with anybody, living or dead, whether you know them or not. And I decided to start a dialogue with my father. And you have to write down 10 stepping stones of their life as you know it. So I wrote that he was born in 1891 in Vicksburg, Mississippi, that his father died when he was 13. He was in the 8th grade, and he had to quit school and be responsible for his mother and 3 siblings. He got them to and just even realizing that, and Vicksburg being where the Civil War was, and all of that, all of that dharma, and that energy in your body. And he was a very prejudiced man, and but he was carrying all this from nobody. He didn't ask for all of that, and still he went out and he made a tremendous success for his family, and we had a beautiful home. And
that's how he showed his love. That's the only way.
That was the only thing he could express. I never knew him to really have a good time, even.
Mm-hmm.
And that was so it put me into a relationship with him that I could dialogue. And I began to ask him questions and listen for what his answers would be. And what came through, I wrote about that in the book. That was so healing. I was able to let go of any anger, any resentment, and just appreciate who he was. And who knows, he must have volunteered to pass some of that on to me, because I needed that to grow. That was my path in this lifetime. I chose it on some level. I really believe that.
I totally believe that. I believe that, like I said, I don't believe there are any accidents. I believe we chose the parents we did so we could grow and help us on our spiritual journey, our soul's journey. Right. And because I always find it amazing how you can have siblings in a family and they'll have different experiences of what the family was like. Somebody will say, "Oh, it was horrible." And the other one goes, "What are you talking about? It was amazing."
Isn't that funny? I've always, I didn't even realize until later that whereas I reacted with horror and terror at my father's explosions, my brother was totally calm about it. And just, he would tell me, he said, he's just insane, We didn't take that personally. My father threw him out of the house when he was 16.
Oh, wow.
And he went to a military school, so he got a job nearby at a bookstore and supported himself. And he was just totally cool with the whole thing. So,
wow.
As you were saying, siblings, so different.
Right. And so here his soul was different, whereas another soul could have been bitter and angry, thinking, I have a terrible father. How could he do that to me? So, we all, it's like I always, teach our practitioners, our prayer partners and stuff, that the people that you attract for healing are the issues you need to heal, or that you could experience. Yeah. If you've experienced it, you have more empathy and you understand, and you can show them how you made it through that.
That's right. It even gets to the point where we have to say, "Oh, crud, what a mess," and then say, "Oh, well, this is a gift on some level. This problem that has appeared right in front of me is obviously here to teach me." And
exactly. And so we can either wallow in the feeling, "Oh, poor me," or we can pick ourselves up, dust ourselves off, and move forward.
Right.
And what did I learn from this? And what was the gift here?
Right. The victim thing never seems to work. There's really no payoff.
No. I also in your book, Peggy Bassett did a memorial for your husband. I never got to hear her but I heard she was incredible. I think she had the Huntington Beach Church.
Huntington Beach Church of Religious Science. And when this is so funny, we wanted to open an Orange County chapter, and we had been driving down from LA to hear her once in a while. And one day a man got up and wanted to make an announcement, and he talked about how he'd adopted his daughter that day and everything. It was Mark Victor Hansen before he'd ever written a book.
Oh,
and I said to Paul, I said, we want that man for the Inside Edge. So I went home and called him on the phone just because of his energy, just because of you could just feel the spaciousness and the possibilities inside of him. And I called him and told him that we were working with Jack Canfield and people in the Beverly Hills chapter, and we wanted to start one in Orange County. He said, can you drive down here right now? And so we jumped in the car, drove to his office, and he said, I'm going to give you my whole mailing list. And it was on stickers,
Right.
So, and I contacted Peggy Bassett and asked her to be on the advisory board and to be an honorary member.
Oh, really? Oh.
And she told the whole congregation, she says, I go to the Inside Edge. That's where I go to get fed. And we were successful overnight because of that.
Oh, I love what she said at your husband's memorial about life, and isn't that so true about how life is? It's just eternal. Where's that baby that you used to have as a child? That baby's gone. There's no baby anymore, right. And so that's all life is.
That's what she said. That you just gone on to another plane. Yeah, that's right.
And I think that is so true. So I just say, enjoy every moment of every plane you're on.
Yeah.
And be grateful for that. We've been putting up there all the information too on your Inside Edge website, everything while we've been talking, and it's just been really fun. So I'm curious too about your current husband being an attorney and really getting into this spirituality, and he had a wonderful marriage too. He loved his wife, was wonderful. She sounded wonderful from the book, and it was the love of his life too. And you both lost them to cancer. And I loved in your book, and because I could visualize it, they were like plotting together to get you.
I think so. I think she was real tired of him dating 130 women. Let's get this done. I think she found Paul, and the two of them said, okay, we're going to do this right. And all sorts of signs began to show up that indicated things that we couldn't possibly have known, that would suddenly come into conversation, that would make us realize that they had to be behind the scenes plotting this.
Right. Yeah. And then, and don't you wonder if all of you had been together in like a previous life, maybe, that
I wonder about that. I actually had a reading by a woman I love who does Akashic record reading.
Oh, I love that.
And I asked her if I'd been with Ted before, and she said that in 2 lifetimes I was with Ted, and this totally makes sense to me. She said you were never in a romantic relationship before. She said, but you were in Ephesus 50 years after Christ had been on the cross, and that's where the Mother Mary went to live. But we were Gnostics, and we were trying to preserve the original words of Jesus. And that we were simply acquaintances in that lifetime. But that makes sense to me. And the other one was in an imperial Chinese dynasty family. And I was a young woman, and Ted was an advisor to my father, who would come, and I would watch him through little slats in the we weren't out in the room with him, but I would just look up to him so and admired him so, which kind of explains how I was immediately open to his wisdom and personality and all that.
Right. Yeah. There are just
whether it's true or not.
But there's just people that you meet, and there's just an immediate connection.
Yes.
Like you've known them forever, right?
Yes. It's like a soul recognition.
Yes. And so
I got that with you, actually.
I know that's how I feel about you. We had never met, and you contacted you, and we just clicked right away. I'm so grateful for this, and I'm looking forward to us maybe doing some more things together. And so are you still working? So are you real active in the Palm Springs Writers Guild, or was that just a?
No, I'm just a member. In fact, Rachel Druten, I don't know if you know Rachel, but she had recommended me to them as a speaker. They have one major speaker in the fall that does a keynote and then a workshop. So I did a 4-hour workshop on memoir, which was so much fun. The people were great and enthusiastic, and it gave me an opportunity to just teach people all about things that they can do with journaling, or just writing short stories. You know, I mean, I'll tell you the story that really turned out funny. It was about a natural knowing. When I decided after about 3 years after I married Ted that I couldn't be on the road 3 days a week at 3 or 4 in the morning, and that I was going to have to turn the Inside Edge into a 501c3, a foundation, and turn it over to the membership. And I didn't know what to do with myself after that. I mean, suddenly I didn't have to work, and I didn't know who I was anymore. I was so locked into that persona. And it was so uncomfortable to me not to have a job or to have something that I was doing. And so I started writing some stories, because Jack Canfield and Mark Victor Hansen had gotten together at the Inside Edge and invented Chicken Soup for the Soul. And so, isn't that amazing?
Yes.
They used to meet at the meetings and sit there and work on the book, you know, before it ever came out. And then it was turned down by, they say 140 publishers, but I remember at least 31 in those days. But anyway, so I thought, well, I like this idea of personal essays. You know, I think if I started writing some personal essays, that would be interesting. So I started writing some stories. And I remember saying to Ted one day, I had about 16 of them. I said, I just don't know who I am. I don't know where these stories are going or what I could even do with them. And the phone rang the day before Thanksgiving, and it was Jack and Mark on the same line. They said, Diana, what are you doing right now? And I said, well, I'm unpacking this turkey. They said, no, throw all your cookbooks in a bag and come over here. They were at a hotel about 3 miles away, meeting with their publisher. And they said, you're going to do the Chicken Soup for the Soul cookbook. I said, okay, I'll be right over. And, you know, on the way over, I'm thinking 101 chicken soup recipes. I don't think so. But then I thought, you know, food is a catalyst for gathering people together and for travel and for meeting people so there's tons of stories around food, and we can just include a recipe. So when I got there, I did my dog and pony show, showed them all my different cookbooks and everything. And the publisher said, well, what do you need to get started? Oh, can you do it in 3 months? And I said, do we need to do it in 3 months? And they said, yes. They didn't tell me that they had an advance order of 950,000 copies from QVC. Oh, I didn't know this. This was the luckiest moment of my life, by the way. And they said, so what do you need to get started? And I said, well, I need an advance. I've always gotten an advance for my cookbooks. And they said, well, we don't give advances. And I said, well, actually, you know, you can do this in-house. You don't need me. And they said, well, we'll give you 1/3 of the book. And I said, okay. In that one moment, I already knew that would be the most prosperous writing I had ever done. And it definitely turned out to be that. So. What a miracle, too. You know, when you think I was just living in the possibility of what stories might become for me, I had no idea. And 15 of those 16 stories fit in there.
See?
They wouldn't put the 16th in because it was about a rat.
They didn't want
that recipe for this. I said, oh, ratatouille. And that was before the, but I put that story in and send me someone. So
Oh, that was great. Well, gosh, we're almost out of time. Diana, Thank
Oh,
you.
I don't
So
want
we'll
to be
have to
over.
get together for sure offline and get together. I want to meet you and Ted sometimes
Yes,
and
we would
you
love
know,
that.
yeah, definitely. So anyway, Diane, oh, thank you. Thank you so much.
It's so lovely to be here
fun.
with you and to support the center, and it just feels great. It's such a
Oh.
gift to me to be with you.
Oh, good. Yeah, I can't wait till we can all be together. You'll have to come to the center sometime with us. I've
Definitely.
never been to our center. Somebody told me, Lori Savage said that you'd been to our center before.
I had
And
only been there a couple of times. Ted and
yes,
I just, we're so into our own meditating, but it
right.
would be beautiful to have that spiritual community, and I yearn for it.
Yes, me
I would love that.
everybody too. So thank you, Diana. Thank you, everyone who's watching. And I'll be back next week, next Thursday. And I have Tracy Brown, who was on the CSL board, and she's all about inclusion and the oneness. So thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank you,
Diana.
everybody.
Send love to Ted. Okay.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.